I thought I knew my father. For 32 years, Richard Thompson had been the cornerstone of our family, a successful real estate developer in Chicago who built our comfortable life from the ground up. He worked long hours, sure, but he always made time for Sunday dinners and never missed my basketball games in high school. Mom used to joke that he loved his family more than his business, which was saying something considering how much he loved closing deals. The day of the funeral, St. Matthew's Cathedral was packed. Colleagues, clients, neighbors, everyone wanted to pay their respects to the man who'd helped shape half the skyline on Chicago's north side. Mom held my hand during the service, her fingers trembling slightly. My sister Rachel sat on her other side, dabbing at her eyes with tissues that seemed insufficient for the magnitude of our loss. He would have loved seeing all these people, Mom whispered to me as we walked behind the casket. He always said a man's legacy isn't measured by his bank account, but by how many lives he touched. 3 days later, we sat in the mahogany-paneled office of Peterson and Associates, the law firm that had handled Dad's affairs for over 20 years. The October rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Michigan Avenue, creating rivulets that distorted the city lights below. Mom wore the same black dress from the funeral. She said she couldn't bear to put on anything else yet. James Peterson, Dad's longtime attorney, looked uncomfortable as he shuffled through the papers on his desk. He'd known our family for decades, had been to our house for barbecues and holiday parties. The man sitting across from us now seemed like a stranger, avoiding eye contact as he cleared his throat repeatedly. "Before we begin," he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence, "I want you to know that your father was very specific about how this should be handled. He left detailed instructions." Rachel leaned forward in her leather chair. "What kind of instructions?" "Dad never liked complicated things." "That's just it," Peterson replied, finally meeting our eyes. "This is complicated." He opened a sealed envelope with Dad's distinctive handwriting across the front, to be read aloud to my family. The paper crackled as Peterson unfolded it, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "To my beloved wife Margaret and my children Alex and Rachel," he began, "if you are hearing this, then I am no longer able to tell you myself what I should have told you long ago." Mom's grip on my hand tightened. Something in Peterson's tone made my stomach clench. "I have lived with a secret that has eaten at me for 15 years. While I have always loved you with my whole heart, I must confess that my heart was bigger than I ever let you know. 15 years ago I met someone. Her name is Julia Martinez, and we have 2 children together, Sophia, who is 14, and Michael, who is 12. The words hit like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs and Mom's hand went limp in mine. Rachel made a sound like she'd been punched. "I know this will hurt you beyond measure," Peterson continued, his voice barely above a whisper now, "and I know that my cowardice in not telling you sooner makes it worse. But Julia and the children knew about you. They knew you were my first family, my official family, and they accepted that. They never asked me to leave you, never demanded more than I could give." "Stop," Mom whispered, but Peterson shook his head. "I'm sorry, Margaret." He was very specific that this all be read. "To my other family," Peterson continued, and those 4 words exploded in the room like a grenade. "Julia, Sophia, and Michael, you have given me joy in ways I never expected. You made me a father again when I thought that part of my life was over. You loved me without conditions, without demands, and I am sorry that I could never give you the public acknowledgement you deserved." I stood up so quickly my chair rolled backward and hit the window. "This isn't real. This can't be real." But Peterson wasn't finished. "The truth is I was a coward. I was afraid of losing either family, so I chose to live a lie that kept both. I convinced myself it was better this way, that everyone could be happy. But lies, no matter how well-intentioned, eventually demand their price." Mom finally spoke, her voice hollow. "How long have you known about this, James?" Peterson set the letter down. "Your father told me about Julia and the children 5 years ago. He set up a trust fund for them, made sure they were taken care of. But he made me promise not to tell you unless something happened to him." 5 years. Rachel's voice cracked. "You've known for 5 years that our father was living a double life?" "He was my client, Rachel. Attorney-client privilege. Don't." I turned from the window, rain still streaking the glass behind me. "Don't hide behind legal terms. This is our family he destroyed." Mom stood up slowly, like she'd aged 20 years in the past 5 minutes. "I need to go home. Margaret, there's more to the will. The financial arrangements, the property divisions. I can't." She moved toward the door like she was sleepwalking. "I can't hear any more right now." As we left Peterson's office, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the elevator doors, 3 people who'd walked in as a family and were walking out as something else entirely. The city lights blurred past as we descended, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were falling much further than just 23 floors. The rain had intensified by the time we reached the parking garage. Mom fumbled with her keys, dropping them twice before I gently took them from her hands. "I'll drive," I said. The 30-minute ride to our family home in Lincoln Park passed in complete silence. The house looked the same red brick facade, the same oak tree Dad had planted when I was 7, the same porch light that Mom always left on. But everything was different now. The home that had been our sanctuary for decades suddenly felt like a stage set for a play none of us had known we were performing in. As I pulled into the driveway, Mom finally spoke. 15 years, Alex. 15 years of birthdays, anniversaries, family vacations, all of it was a lie. I wanted to say something comforting, something that would make sense of this chaos, but the words wouldn't come. Because she was right. Every family dinner where Dad was working late, every weekend business trip, every time he kissed us goodbye, how much of it had been real? That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to reconcile the father I'd loved with the stranger in that letter. Somewhere across the city were 2 kids, Sophia and Michael, who'd lost their father too. Kids who'd grown up in the shadow of a secret, who'd probably wondered why their dad couldn't take them to school events or why he never talked about his work friends. As dawn broke over Chicago, casting long shadows across my room, I realized that Dad's death had been just the beginning. The real reckoning was still to come. 3 days after the will reading, I did something I never thought I'd do. I looked up Julia Martinez in the phone directory. Dad's letter had mentioned she lived in Pilsen, a neighborhood about 20 minutes south of our Lincoln Park home. 20 minutes that might as well have been 20 light years for how distant our worlds had been. Mom hadn't left her room since we got home from Peterson's office. Rachel had been fielding calls from relatives and Dad's business associates, making excuses about Mom's health and postponing meetings. The life insurance claims, the business decisions, the funeral expenses, everything was piling up while we tried to process the bomb Dad had dropped on our family. "You can't just show up at her door," Rachel said when I told her my plan. She was sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by sympathy cards and legal documents. "What are you going to say?" "Hi, I'm your dead boyfriend's legitimate son." "I don't know what I'm going to say," I admitted, pouring coffee into Dad's favorite mug without thinking. The sight of it made my chest tighten. "But I need to see them. I need to understand who they are." "Why?" Rachel's voice was sharp with exhaustion. "Why do you need to understand anything? They're strangers, Alex. Strangers who helped Dad betray our family for 15 years. I sat down across from her, studying my sister's face. She looked like Mom's, same green eyes, same stubborn set to her jaw. But right now she looked brittle, like she might shatter if I said the wrong thing. "Because they're not strangers," I said finally. "Not really. Sophia and Michael, they're our brother and sister." "Half-brother and half-sister," Rachel corrected. "And that's only biology. Biology doesn't make a family." She was right, of course. But as I drove through Chicago's afternoon traffic toward Pilsen, I couldn't shake the feeling that biology was exactly what was pulling me there. These kids had Dad's genes, probably had his stubborn streak and his way of drumming his fingers when he was thinking. They'd grown up loving the same man I'd loved, grieving the same loss. Pilsen was a world away from Lincoln Park. Where our neighborhood had manicured lawns and Victorian townhouses, this area pulsed with vibrant murals, Ticarius, and the sound of children playing in the street despite the October chill. Dad used to drive through here sometimes on business, and I'd always wondered what drew him to this part of the city. Now I knew. 1247 West 18th Street was a modest 2-story house painted cheerful yellow with blue trim. A small garden in the front yard showed signs of careful tending. Someone had planted mums and decorative gourds for fall. A red bicycle with training wheels leaned against the porch steps. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching the house and trying to work up the courage to knock on the door. What do you say to your father's secret family? What do you say to children who just lost the only father they'd known? Finally, I got out of the car and walked up the front steps. Before I could change my mind, I knocked. The woman who answered was not what I'd expected. Julia Martinez was probably in her early 40s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore scrubs. She was a nurse, I realized, and had obviously just gotten home from work. When she saw me, her face went very still. "You're Alex," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. "How did you? You look like him. Especially around the eyes." She stepped back from the door. "I was wondering when one of you would come." The living room was small but warm, with family photos covering every available surface. I tried not to look too closely at them. I wasn't ready to see Dad's face smiling back at me from this other life. A teenage girl sat at the dining room table working on homework. She had Dad's dark hair and the same concentrated frown he got when he was working on a difficult problem. "Sophia," Julia said gently, "this is Alex, Richard's son." Sophia looked up and I saw the exact moment recognition hit her. Her eyes widened and she dropped her pencil. "From the other family?" The phrase hit me like a slap. Other family. Is that how Dad had talked about us? Had he described coming home to us as visiting his other family? "Where's Michael?" Julia asked, looking around. "Upstairs playing video games. He's having a hard time." Julia nodded and gestured for me to sit on the couch. "Can I get you coffee? Water?" Coffee would be good. I needed something to do with my hands, something to focus on besides the surreal nature of this conversation. While Julia was in the kitchen, Sophia and I stared at each other across the room. She was pretty in the way teenage girls are when they're just starting to grow into their faces. But it was her eyes that got to me. They were Dad's eyes, curious and intelligent. "He talked about you," she said suddenly. "About you and Rachel. He said you played basketball in college." "Just high school," I corrected. Dad always exaggerated my athletic abilities. A small smile tugged at Sophia's mouth. "He did that with us too. Told everyone Michael was going to be a professional soccer player because he scored 2 goals in 1 game. Julia returned with coffee and sat down carefully, like she was afraid any sudden movement might spook me. "I know this is strange for all of us," she began. "Richard always said that if something happened to him he hoped our families could, well, he hoped we could at least talk." He hoped. The anger I'd been suppressing for 3 days suddenly flared. He hoped we could talk? He had 15 years to make that happen. 15 years to tell us about you, to tell you about us properly, to figure out how to blend our families. Instead, he chose to lie to everyone. Sophia's face flushed. "He didn't lie about loving us." "No," I said, and my voice was harsher than I intended. "But he lied about everything else. He lied about where he was, who he was with, why he couldn't make it to school events or family dinners. He lied to my mother every single day for 15 years. And what about what your mother had that we didn't?" Sophia shot back, standing up from the table. "She got to be his wife. She got to go to work parties with him, got to have everyone know she was his. We got him 2 nights a week and every other weekend, and we were grateful for it because we loved him." The pain in her voice stopped me cold. This 14-year-old girl had lost her father too, and instead of having the comfort of family and friends rallying around her, she was sitting in her living room being yelled at by a stranger. "Sophia," Julia said quietly, but her daughter wasn't finished. "You want to know what he lied about?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "He lied when he said he'd figure out a way to make it work. He lied when he said someday we'd all be one big family. He lied when he promised he'd tell you about us when the time was right. But he never lied about loving us, and he never lied about loving you either." She ran upstairs, and a moment later I heard a door slam. Julia sighed and rubbed her temples. "She's angry," Julia said. "We all are. But not at you, at him. At the situation he left us in." "How did it start?" I asked. "How did you and Dad?" Julia was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. "I was working in the emergency room at Northwestern Memorial. Richard came in with a panic attack. He thought he was having a heart attack. It was right after your grandfather died and he was dealing with the estate, the business pressures. I remembered that time. Dad had been stressed, working 18-hour days trying to sort out Grandpa's tangled finances. We started talking," Julia continued. "He came back a few weeks later, said he wanted to thank me for being kind to him during a difficult time. We went to coffee, then dinner. And then," she shrugged. "Then I was pregnant with Sophia and everything got complicated. Did you know about us? From the beginning?" He told me he was married the second time we went out. Said he loved his family but that his marriage had become more of a partnership than a romance. I should have walked away then." She looked at me directly. "I know you probably think I'm a terrible person." I wanted to say yes, wanted to blame her for destroying my family. But looking at her tired face, seeing the photos of Dad with Sophia and Michael on every surface, I realized it wasn't that simple. "I don't know what to think," I admitted. Heavy footsteps on the stairs announced Michael's arrival. He was 12, all elbows and knees, with Dad's nose and what looked like it might become Dad's height. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs when he saw me, then looked at his mother. "Is this him? Alex?" "Yes, sweetheart. Come say hello." Michael approached cautiously like I might bite. "Mom says you and Rachel are our brother and sister." Half-brother and sister, I corrected, then immediately felt like a jerk. But yeah, I guess we are. Do you play soccer? No, but I can teach you basketball if you want. For the first time since I'd arrived, Michael smiled. It was Dad's smile, slightly lopsided and completely charming. I stayed for another hour looking at photos and listening to stories about Dad's life in this house. It was like seeing him through a funhouse mirror. Everything was familiar but distorted. The man who'd taught me to throw a curveball had also taught Sophia to drive stick shift in the empty parking lot of a grocery store. The father who'd helped me with my college applications had also stayed up all night helping Michael build a volcano for the science fair. As I was getting ready to leave, Julia walked me to the door. What happens now? She asked. With the will, the estate, all of it? I don't know. Peterson said there were specific provisions for you and the kids, but Mom couldn't handle hearing the details. We'll probably have to meet again, all of us together. Julia nodded. Richard left a letter for you too. For you and Rachel specifically. She disappeared for a moment and came back with an envelope with my name on it in Dad's handwriting. He asked me to give it to you when we met. I took the letter, my hands surprisingly steady. Thank you. Alex. Julia called as I reached my car. For what it's worth, he talked about you and Rachel all the time. He was so proud of both of you. That was never a lie. The drive home passed in a blur. I kept thinking about Sophia's anger, Michael's smile, the photos of Dad pushing them on swings and helping with homework. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had more questions than answers, but one thing was clear, like it or not, our family had just gotten bigger. I sat in my car in our driveway for 20 minutes, staring at the letter Julia had given me. Dad's handwriting on the envelope was as familiar as my own, the same script that had signed my report cards, birthday cards, and graduation congratulations. But this felt different. This felt final. Inside the house, I could hear Rachel on the phone with someone, her voice tight with stress. Mom's bedroom door was still closed. The house felt hollow, like the foundation had shifted and nothing quite fit together anymore. I went to Dad's study instead of my room. It was exactly as he'd left it, his reading glasses on the desk, a half-finished crossword puzzle next to his computer, the smell of his cologne still faintly in the air. I sat in his leather chair and opened the letter. Alex, if you're reading this, then you've met Julia, Sophia, and Michael. I can only imagine how difficult that must have been for you, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for putting you in a position where you had to be the one to bridge the gap. I was too cowardly to cross myself. I know you have questions and I know you're angry. You have every right to be. What I did was selfish and unfair to everyone involved. But I need you to understand something. I never stopped loving your mother, you or Rachel. My love for Julia and the children didn't diminish my love for you. It just made everything more complicated than I knew how to handle. I met Julia during the darkest period of my life. Your grandfather's death had hit me harder than I expected, and your mother was dealing with her own grief. We were like ships passing in the night, both hurting but unable to help each other. Julia was a lifeline when I was drowning. I should have ended it when I realized how serious my feelings were becoming. I should have been honest with your mother, worked through our problems, or accepted that our marriage might not survive. Instead, I chose the coward's way out. I chose to have both families and tell myself I was protecting everyone. But the truth is, Alex, I wasn't protecting anyone. I was protecting myself from having to make an impossible choice. Sophia and Michael are good kids. They're smart, funny, and kind, just like you and Rachel were at their ages. They didn't ask to be born into this situation, and they don't deserve to pay the price for my mistakes. They've spent their entire lives knowing they were secrets, knowing they couldn't talk about their father at school or introduce him to their friends. I'm asking you, not as your father but as one human being to another, to help them. Help them understand that they're not mistakes, that they're not shameful secrets. Help them see that family isn't just about blood or law or who lives in which house. Help them know they belong somewhere. I know this is unfair to ask. I know I have no right to request anything from you after what I've put your family through. But you're the strongest person I know, Alex. You've always been the one who could see past the immediate problem to find solutions. You're the one who could make peace between Rachel and your mother when they fought, who could calm me down when business deals went wrong. I'm hoping you can find a way to make peace with this situation too. The will provides for Julia and the children financially. They won't be a burden to you or your mother. But money isn't what they need most. They need to know they're not alone in the world. They need family. I love you, son. I'm proud of the man you've become. I just hope someday you can forgive the man I turned out to be. Dad. I read the letter 3 times before setting it down. Outside Dad's study window, the sun was setting over Lincoln Park, casting long shadows across the yard where he'd taught me to ride a bike, where we'd played catch for hours on summer evenings. Rachel appeared in the doorway looking exhausted. Was that from him? From Dad. I handed her the letter wordlessly. She read it quickly, her expression growing more pained with each paragraph. He wants us to take care of them, she said when she finished. His other children. He wants us to play happy family with the people who helped him betray us. They didn't betray us, Rachel. They were just living their lives. Their lives that included our father. She crumpled the letter in her fist. God, Alex, how can you be so calm about this? How can you act like this is just some minor inconvenience we need to work through? Because being angry isn't going to bring him back, I said. And it's not going to undo what he did. Sophia and Michael lost their father too. They're grieving too. Rachel stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Whose side are you on? There are no sides, Rachel. That's the point. Dad made sure there couldn't be sides by lying to everyone. She sank into the chair across from Dad's desk, suddenly looking very young. I keep thinking about all the times he wasn't here. All the school plays he missed, the family dinners where he showed up late, the vacations he had to cut short for work. How much of that was because of them? I'd been wondering the same thing, but hearing Rachel's voice, it made it real in a way that hurt. I don't know. Maybe some of it. Maybe none of it. Does it matter now? Of course it matters. Those were our moments, our memories with him. And now I find out he was dividing his attention, his love, his time between us and them. How do I not take that personally? Before I could answer, we heard Mom's bedroom door open for the first time in 3 days. Her footsteps were soft on the hardwood floor as she made her way downstairs. Rachel and I exchanged glances. We'd been waiting for her to emerge, but now that she had, neither of us knew what to say. Mom appeared in the study doorway wearing one of Dad's old sweaters over her nightgown. She looked fragile, like a strong wind might blow her away. I heard you went to see them, she said to me. Her voice was hoarse from crying. Yes. What are they like? I thought about Sophia's fierce defense of her father, Michael's shy smile, Julia's tired eyes. They're nice people, Mom. They're good kids. Mom nodded slowly, then noticed the crumpled letter in Rachel's hand. What's that? Rachel smoothed out the pages and handed them to her. It's from Dad. To Alex specifically. Mom read the letter more slowly than Rachel had, pausing several times to wipe her eyes. When she finished, she folded it carefully and set it on Dad's desk. He's asking you to take care of them, she said. Mom, you don't have to. No, Alex. He's right about one thing, those children didn't choose this situation. And they just lost their father. She was quiet for a moment, staring at Dad's crossword puzzle. I've been lying in bed for 3 days trying to figure out when I lost him. When he stopped being the man I married and became someone I didn't know. Mom. But the truth is, I don't think he ever stopped being that man. I think he just became 2 different versions of himself, one for us and one for them. And maybe the version they knew was just as real as the version we knew. Rachel made a sound of protest, but Mom held up her hand. I'm not saying I forgive him. I'm not saying what he did was right. But I am saying that those children loved him just as much as we did, and they're grieving just as hard as we are. And if he asked you to help them, Alex, then maybe you should consider it. What about the will? Rachel asked. What about the money, the property, all of that? We'll figure it out, Mom said. Peterson said there was a meeting scheduled for next week with everyone present, both families. We'll hear what your father wanted, and then we'll decide what we can live with. She started to leave, then turned back to us. Your father was a lot of things, a loving husband, a good provider, a successful businessman. But he was also a coward who took the easy way out of an impossible situation. I can hate him for the coward part while still loving him for the rest. I think you can too. After Mom went back upstairs, Rachel and I sat in Dad's study as darkness fell over Chicago. The house was quiet except for the old radiators kicking on and the distant sound of traffic on Lakeshore Drive. The meeting next week is going to be awful, Rachel said finally. Yeah, it is. Are you really going to do it? What he asked. Take care of them? I thought about Michael asking if I played soccer, about Sophia defending Dad even through her tears. I thought about Julia working as a nurse, raising 2 kids essentially as a single mother while loving a man who could never fully be hers. I think I have to try, I said. Not for him but for them. And maybe for us too. Rachel was quiet for a long time. Then, they really look like him? Michael has his smile. Sophia has his eyes and his stubborn streak. Great, Rachel said with the first hint of humor I'd heard from her in days. As if one stubborn Thompson wasn't enough. But she was smiling when she said it, and for the first time since the will reading, I thought maybe we might find a way through this after all. The meeting at Peterson's office was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the initial will reading. I'd spent the intervening days fielding calls from Dad's business associates, helping Rachel sort through his personal effects, and trying to convince Mom to eat more than toast and coffee. None of us talked about what we'd say when we faced Julia and the kids again. The morning of the meeting, Mom surprised us by coming downstairs fully dressed in a navy blue suit, the same one she'd worn to Dad's business dinners. She'd done her hair and put on makeup, and for a moment she looked like her old self again. "I thought about wearing black," she said when she caught me staring. "But then I decided I've spent enough time in morning clothes. Today we're going to figure out how to move forward." Rachel wore her best professional outfit, a gray blazer and skirt that made her look older than her 28 years. I'd chosen a simple blue shirt and khakis, the kind of thing Dad would have approved of for a business meeting. We arrived at Peterson's office 10 minutes early, but Julia, Sophia, and Michael were already there, sitting in the same conference room where our world had imploded the week before. Julia wore a simple black dress and looked nervous. Sophia sat beside her mother, fidgeting with a small cross necklace. Michael was in the chair closest to the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. The moment we walked in, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mom stopped just inside the doorway and I saw her hands clench into fists. This was the first time she'd seen Dad's other family, the people who'd shared 15 years of his life without her knowledge. "Margaret," Julia said quietly, standing up. "I'm Julia. I'm sorry for your loss. For all of our losses." Mom stared at her for a long moment. Julia was younger than Mom by probably 8 years, with kind eyes and nervous energy. She was pretty in an understated way, the kind of woman Dad would have found attractive but not threatening to his marriage. At least that's probably what he'd told himself. "You're the nurse?" Mom said finally. "From Northwestern Memorial." "Yes. Richard told me about you once. Years ago. He said there was a nurse who'd been particularly kind to him during a difficult time." Mom's voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking slightly. "I never imagined." She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she walked to the chair directly across from Julia and sat down with the posture of a woman prepared for battle. Peterson cleared his throat and opened a thick folder. "Now that everyone's here, let me outline the specifics of Richard's will. As you know, this is an unusual situation." For the next 30 minutes, Peterson walked us through the financial arrangements Dad had made. Julia and the children were provided for. There was a trust fund for Sophia and Michael's education, money for Julia's mortgage, and a monthly allowance that would ensure they could maintain their current lifestyle. But the bulk of Dad's estate, the business, the house in Lincoln Park, the investments went to Mom, Rachel, and me. However, Peterson continued, Richard included several specific requests that he hoped both families would honor. He pulled out another letter, this one addressed to all of us. He wanted the families to meet regularly, holidays, birthdays, important milestones. He wanted Sophia and Michael to know their half-siblings, and he wanted all of his children to maintain a relationship with each other. Sophia spoke up for the first time. "What if they don't want a relationship with us?" The pain in her voice was unmistakable. This 14-year-old girl had lost her father and was now sitting in a room full of people who had every reason to resent her existence. Rachel surprised everyone by answering first, "We're not going to punish you for what our father did wrong." It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel either. It was Rachel being practical, which was the best we could hope for under the circumstances. Peterson continued reading Dad's requests. He wanted Michael to have Dad's baseball card collection, something I'd assumed would come to me. He wanted Sophia to have Mom's grandmother's jewelry, pieces that had been in our family for 3 generations. He wanted both families to scatter his ashes together at Montrose Beach, where he'd apparently taken all of his children over the years. Each request felt like a small knife twist. Dad had thought through every detail of blending our families except the most important one. He'd never bothered to prepare us for it while he was alive. "There's one more thing," Peterson said. Richard established a college fund for all 4 children, Alex, Rachel, Sophia, and Michael. But he stipulated that the money can only be accessed if the families maintain contact with each other. If the relationship dissolves, the fund goes to charity. "He's manipulating us from the grave," Rachel said flatly. "He's trying to make sure his children know each other," Julia replied, her voice sharper than I'd heard it before. "He's trying to make sure Sophia and Michael don't grow up feeling like they were mistakes." "They weren't mistakes," Mom said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. Richard may have made mistakes, but those children weren't among them. Michael had been silent throughout the entire meeting, but now he spoke up. "Are you going to hate us forever?" His question was directed at Mom, and the raw vulnerability in it seemed to break something inside her. She studied his face, Dad's nose, Dad's cowlick, Dad's way of tilting his head when he was uncertain. "No, sweetheart," she said gently. "I'm not going to hate you. I might hate the situation your father put us all in, but I'm not going to hate you." "What about Christmas?" Sophia asked. "He always said that someday we'd all have Christmas together." The room fell silent. Christmas had always been sacred in our family, just the four of us, opening presents by the tree Dad picked out every year from the lot on Lincoln Avenue. The idea of sharing that with Julia and her children felt impossible. But then I thought about Michael's question, about Sophia's hope that we wouldn't hate them forever. I thought about Dad's letter asking me to help them feel like they belonged somewhere. "Maybe we could try Thanksgiving first," I heard myself say. "Something smaller. Less loaded." Mom looked at me with surprise, but she nodded slowly. "Thanksgiving might work." Julia's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that?" "I think we have to try," I said. "For them." I gestured towards Sophia and Michael. "They didn't ask to be born into this mess, but they're here and they're our family whether we planned it or not." The meeting ended with tentative plans for Thanksgiving dinner at our house in Lincoln Park. It felt surreal, planning a holiday with people who'd been strangers 2 weeks ago, but it also felt like the first step toward something that might eventually resemble healing. As we prepared to leave, Sophia approached Rachel hesitantly. Could I see a picture of him? From when you were kids?" Rachel's expression softened for the first time all day. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through photos until she found one of Dad pushing her on the swing set in our backyard when she was about Sophia's age. "He built that swing set himself," Rachel said. "Took him 3 weekends because he insisted on reading the instructions in English and Spanish to make sure he didn't miss anything." Sophia smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. "He did the same thing with my bike. Said if something was worth doing, it was worth doing right." "That sounds like Dad," Rachel said, and for a moment she almost sounded fond. 2 weeks later, Thanksgiving Day. I stood in our kitchen at 6 a.m., staring at a 20-pound turkey and wondering what the hell I'd gotten us into. Mom had been cooking Thanksgiving dinner for our family of 4 for as long as I could remember, but this year we were hosting 7 people, and she seemed determined to make it perfect. "The stuffing needs to go in the oven at 8:30, she called from the pantry, where she was organizing ingredients with military precision. "The sweet potatoes at 9:15, the green bean casserole at 10. "Mom, you don't have to cook enough food for an army." "Yes, I do." She emerged with her arms full of spices. "This is the first time Julia's children will have Thanksgiving in this house. I want them to feel welcome." It was the first time I'd heard her refer to them as Julia's children instead of them, or those kids. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. Rachel arrived at noon with 3 pies from her favorite bakery and a bottle of wine that she immediately opened. "I figure if we're doing this, we might as well do it properly," she said, pouring generous glasses for both of us. "It's noon, Rachel. It's Thanksgiving. And this is the weirdest Thanksgiving in the history of Thanksgiving. I think that calls for day drinking." At exactly 2 o'clock, the time we'd agreed upon, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see Julia holding a covered dish while Sophia and Michael stood slightly behind her, both looking nervous. Mom answered the door wearing her best apron and a smile that looked only slightly forced. "Julia, children, welcome. Please come in." The next few hours passed in a strange dance of politeness and careful conversation. Julia had brought homemade rolls that were absolutely delicious, and Mom made a point of asking for the recipe. Sophia helped set the table and complimented the china, the same set that would have been hers to inherit if the situation were different. Michael was fascinated by our house, asking questions about the photos on the walls and the books on Dad's shelves. When he found Dad's chess set, his face lit up. "He taught me to play," Michael said. "He said chess was about thinking 3 moves ahead." "He taught me the same thing," I replied. "Want to play a game after dinner?" The kid's smile was so much like Dad's that it almost took my breath away. Dinner itself was surprisingly normal. We talked about school, work, the weather, safe topics that didn't require us to navigate the emotional minefield of our shared grief. Sophia told us about her debate team, and Rachel shared stories from her job at the art museum. Julia talked about her work at the hospital, and Mom asked thoughtful questions about healthcare that showed she'd been listening. It wasn't until we were clearing the dishes that the elephant in the room finally made itself known. Michael was helping me load the dishwasher when he asked, "Do you think he would have been happy? Seeing us all together like this?" The question caught me off guard. I looked around the kitchen, Mom teaching Sophia how to wrap leftover turkey, Rachel and Julia discussing Chicago's restaurant scene, the remnants of a successful holiday meal scattered across the counters. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think he would have been really happy." "Good," Michael said. "Because I think he's probably watching somehow and I want him to know we're okay." Later that evening, after Julia and the kids had gone home, our family sat in the living room with full stomachs and complicated feelings. The house felt different, not empty the way it had since Dad died, but expanded somehow. "That wasn't as terrible as I expected," Rachel admitted. "The children are lovely," Mom said. "Sophia has your father's intelligence and Michael has his kindness." "And Julia?" Mom was quiet for a moment. "Julia loved him. I could see it in how she talked about him, how she watched Sophia and Michael when they shared their memories. I don't have to like what happened between them, but I can't hate someone for loving my husband." As I went to bed that night, I thought about Dad's letter and his hope that we could become one family. We weren't there yet, might never be there completely. But we'd taken the first step and it felt like something Dad would have been proud of. 3 months later, I was at Sophia's debate tournament, cheering alongside Julia as my half-sister demolished her opponent with arguments that sounded suspiciously like the ones Dad used to make at the dinner table. Rachel was teaching Michael to drive in the empty parking lot of her apartment complex. Mom had started including Julia in her book club, and the two women had developed a friendship that was complicated but genuine. We were still figuring out how to be a family, this strange, blended, unconventional family that Dad had created through deception and love in equal measure. We had good days and bad days, moments of connection and moments of tension. But we were trying and somehow that felt like enough. On the anniversary of Dad's death, we all met at Montrose Beach to scatter his ashes as he'd requested. As we stood at the water's edge, watching the wind carry away the remains of the man who'd brought us all together, I realized that his greatest gift to us hadn't been the money or the houses or the provisions in his will. His greatest gift had been showing us that family isn't just about blood or law or who lives in which house. Family is about the people you choose to love, the people you choose to forgive, and the people you choose to build a life with, even when that life is messy and complicated and nothing like what you originally planned. As we walked back to our cars, Michael slipped his hand into mine. "Thanks for not hating us," he said. "Thanks for being worth not hating," I replied. And for the first time since that devastating day in Peterson's office, I felt like we were all going to be okay.